Today in the archive, we continue to observe the failures of the human soul. Some people only value love after they have already destroyed it. The worst lies are often told by the people we trust the most. In this case, we document a family pushed into unbearable pressure, where fear, hidden choices, and growing suspicion slowly turn one home into an emotional battlefield. Every passing moment feels heavier. Every decision feels more dangerous. And nothing is as safe as it appears beneath the surface. This story explores raw human psychology. I am your anchor, and the case opens now.
If you walked into my living room right now, you would see my husband, David, sitting in a specialized leather wheelchair by the large bay window. He is only 38 years old, but his body is completely quiet. His right hand rests uselessly in his lap, curled like a dried leaf, and his eyes, though wide and deeply expressive, are trapped behind a wall of silence. He can understand every word I say. He can recognize our daughter's laughter, and he can feel the warmth of the sun on his skin, but he can barely utter a single fragmented sound. To the neighbors, to our family, and even to our sweet 7-year-old daughter, Lily, David is the tragic victim of a sudden, devastating neurological event. They look at me with pity, calling me a saint for how tirelessly I care for him day and night. But to truly understand why David is locked inside this silent physical prison, and why my own mind has become a cage of permanent guilt, we have to go back to the very beginning. 10 years ago, when David and I married, I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. Our love was not a loud, flashy thing. It was a deep, unshakable partnership. David was a charismatic, ambitious man who ran a boutique financial consulting firm, while I worked as a pediatric nurse. When our daughter Lily was born, David became the center of our universe. I still remember him staying awake for 3 straight nights when Lily had pneumonia as an infant, cradling her against his chest and whispering that he would gladly give his own life if it meant she could breathe easily. He was my rock, my protector, and my absolute best friend. Because my job as a nurse was emotionally taxing and highly structured, and because David was the financial expert, I trusted him completely with our lives. I never questioned him. When he suggested we merge all of our accounts and that he handle all the investments, bills, and household savings, I agreed without a single doubt. I remember hugging him in our kitchen, laughing, and saying, "I am so glad I do not have to worry about the numbers, David. I trust you with everything we are." He kissed my forehead that night and told me that my only job was to love him and our baby girl. There is a specific psychological trap that makes situations like mine possible, and researchers actually have a name for it: financial coercive control. It happens when one partner manages every single account so completely for so long that the other partner simply stops asking, not because they are careless, but because the asking itself has been engineered to lead absolutely nowhere. I didn't stop questioning David because I was foolish or naive. I stopped because years of him repeating, "Let me carry this," had slowly, silently trained me not to. Trust is not a safety net. It is a blindfold we willingly wear, hoping the person leading us has eyes. For years, I wore that blindfold proudly, never imagining that the hands guiding me were slowly leading us toward a cliff. Everything changed when Lily was diagnosed with aggressive, fast-moving leukemia. Our beautiful, energetic little girl was suddenly pale, fragile, and fighting for her life. The medical bills began accumulating faster than we could count. It was during this terrifying time that David came home one evening, sat on the edge of our bed, and put his face in his hands. He started weeping, telling me that his consulting business had completely dried up due to a major client bankruptcy. He told me we were essentially broke, and that the bank was threatening to foreclose on our home if we did not pay our debts. He looked up at me with red, exhausted eyes and said, "Sarah, I do not know how we are going to pay for Lily's first major round of specialized chemotherapy. I have failed you both." My maternal instinct completely took over. I told him we would fight, no matter what. I immediately picked up extra double shifts at the hospital, working nearly 80 exhausting hours a week. I sold my mother's antique jewelry, emptied my modest retirement fund, and even took out several high-interest personal loans from private lenders just to cover the first $30,000 medical bill. I was running on empty, barely sleeping, surviving on coffee and sheer willpower. During those dark months, my next-door neighbor and childhood best friend, Emily, was always there. Emily had been my closest confidant since we were 10 years old. She was stunningly beautiful, the kind of woman who commanded every room she walked into with an effortless, magnetic grace. She was also deeply, quietly manipulative, though I was too blinded by affection to see it then. She would constantly offer to babysit Lily during my long night shifts so David could rest after his stressful days of trying to rebuild his business. Looking back now, there were subtle, strange red flags that I brushed aside because I was too exhausted to think clearly. There was one afternoon when I came home 2 hours early from a shift. I walked through the back door and saw them in the kitchen. David was standing close behind Emily, his hand hovering just an inch from her waist as they laughed quietly. The moment they heard the door click, they sprang apart. My stomach did a strange, cold flip. Later night, I confronted David in our bedroom, asking him outright if something was happening between them. David scoffed, rolling his eyes with practiced offense. He looked at me with absolute sincerity, took my hands and said, "Sarah, she is your best friend. She is practically our sister. How can you even think that? My blood pressure is through the roof. I'm taking medication just to keep from collapsing, and I am losing my mind trying to save our finances. I don't have the energy for this suspicion." I backed down immediately. I felt incredibly guilty for even asking. Besides, at that moment, I was so utterly consumed by the exhaustion of trying to save Lily's life and paying off the loans that I simply did not have the emotional capacity to fight him. I needed to believe him. I needed him to be the man I married. But Emily was highly manipulative. She would look me in the eyes, hug me, and say, "Sarah, you are working yourself to death, you poor thing. Let me take care of David and Lily today. You just focus on earning the money." I felt so incredibly grateful for her. The deepest betrayals never come from our enemies, because we never open our fortress gates to let them in. Most people tell you to guard your marriage like a hawk and never let your guard down, and I agree with them. What they never tell you is what to do when the intruder is already family. Emily was more than a friend to me. She was someone I trusted with my sick child, someone who shared my life, my secrets, and my home. How do you protect your marriage from someone like that? But the illusion finally shattered when the pediatric oncology clinic called me to confirm that Lily's second major treatment cycle was scheduled for the following week. This second critical round was going to cost $45,000. When I told David, he instantly became defensive, pacing the living room and claiming that we had absolutely nothing left and that we would have to beg the clinic for a delay. Terrified of putting our daughter's recovery at risk, I waited until David went upstairs to take a shower. I began searching his study, desperately looking for our home equity documents to see if we could somehow squeeze another loan from the bank. I pulled open his bottom desk drawer, searching for a key. When I tugged on the back panel of the drawer, it clicked out of place, revealing a hidden compartment holding a thick leather folder. Inside were bank statements for an offshore account under David's sole name. I stared at the documents, my chest tightening. Just months before Lily's diagnosis, during the exact period David claimed his business was collapsing and we were losing everything, he had transferred over $160,000 into this hidden account. And then, week by week, the statements showed chronological, massive transfers directly to Emily's personal account. He had rented a luxury downtown penthouse in Emily's name and purchased thousands of dollars in designer jewelry, completely draining the funds. David had possessed a fortune, but because of Emily's manipulation and his own weakness, he had willingly spent every single dollar on a secret, lavish affair just before our daughter fell ill, leaving us entirely broke when the medical bills hit, and forcing me to beg private lenders for loans. The shock and rage were so intense I couldn't breathe. My hands shook violently, but a cold, desperate instinct took over. I wanted the absolute truth. I forced myself to put the folder back exactly as I found it, gripping the desk to keep from screaming. I walked upstairs, swallowing the bile in my throat, and pretended everything was normal when David came out of the bathroom. I waited, agonizingly, until he fell into a deep sleep. I quietly slipped his phone from the nightstand, using his fingerprint while he slept, and opened his hidden, encrypted messaging folder. There, the horror became complete. I saw months of deleted cloud backups containing highly intimate messages between them. They joked about my exhausting double shifts. Emily mocked how easy I was to fool, and David reassured her that I would always find a way to work and raise the money because of how desperate I was to save Lily. But the message that broke my heart into pieces was one David had sent to Emily just weeks ago. He wrote, "I love you more than life. If I had met you first, I would have married you in a heartbeat instead of Sarah. She is just a duty now." I sat in the dark, cold bathroom floor, holding the phone, my world turning entirely to ash. The man I had loved, the father of my child, and the woman I trusted as a sister had systematically dismantled my life while I worked myself to the bone. I stood up, the absolute limits of my human endurance shattered, and walked out to the bedroom to confront him, completely unaware that the stress of what was about to happen would trigger the terrifying medical crisis that changed everything.
If you stayed this far, it's because you need to see where justice finally leads. Sarah is approaching a breaking point, carrying more emotional weight than anyone around her can see. What would you do if your heart and your conscience pulled in opposite directions? The mask is about to be removed. Will you stay to see the fallout?
The moment I turned on the bedroom lights and threw the phone onto the bed, David sat up, blinking against the sudden brightness. His eyes darted from my tear-streaked, pale face to the illuminated screen displaying his most intimate betrayal. When I demanded to know how he could fund a luxury penthouse for my childhood best friend while allowing his own daughter's life-saving cancer treatment to hang in the balance, his face twisted in a mixture of panic and defensive rage. "Sarah, let me explain. You don't understand the pressure I've been under," he yelled, his voice strained, his chest heaving. He scrambled out of bed, his face flushing a deep, dangerous crimson. "The pressure," I screamed, the words tearing from my throat like broken glass. "How dare you stand there and tell me we are broke, David? You looked me in the eyes and begged me to delay our daughter's chemotherapy, while you were texting my best friend about a massive payout you have coming next week, promising her a luxury vacation with money you swore we didn't have, while your 7-year-old daughter is fighting to stay alive. Tell me, who are you, David? I worked 80 hours a week. I took out loans from predators. I sold my mother's wedding ring. And you were telling her that you wished you had married her instead of me? That I was just a duty?" David opened his mouth to shout back, his hands clenching into fists. But suddenly, the words caught in his throat. A look of absolute, primal terror washed over his features. He clutched the left side of his head, letting out a choked, half-strangled gasp. "Sarah, my head. Something's wrong," he whispered, his voice suddenly slurring, sliding into a thick, unintelligible mumble. Before I could even process the words, the left side of his face began to droop, pulled downward by an invisible, heavy weight. His right leg buckled beneath him, and he collapsed heavily onto the hardwood floor, clutching his skull. His left arm lay completely limp beside him, and his eyes rolled back, desperately trying to focus on me as he began to slip into a state of semi-consciousness. My pediatric nursing training, combined with the emergency medical classes I had taken to manage Lily's complex health needs, kicked in instantly. I didn't see my husband. I saw a clinical checklist: acute neurological emergency, severe hemorrhagic stroke, or massive cerebral aneurysm. The signs were textbook, glaring, and fatal. I knew with absolute mathematical precision that a catastrophic event like this had a golden window of 10 minutes. If a call was placed immediately and treatment began within that window, the pressure on his brain could be relieved and he would likely make a full recovery. Every single minute after that 10-minute mark meant the irreversible death of millions of brain cells. It was the difference between a full life and permanent, catastrophic disability. I slowly grabbed my phone. My thumb hovered over the 3 digits that would save his life. But as I looked down at him, my gaze drifted to the leather folder still sitting on the nightstand and the glowing screen of his phone. Why is it that we are expected to show mercy to the very people who had no mercy for us? A suffocating wave of pain, betrayal, and absolute exhaustion crashed over me, freezing my thumb in midair. I tried to press the screen. I physically tried to force my finger down, but my muscles refused to cooperate. I looked at David. He was making a wet, rattling sound, his chest rising and falling in erratic, shallow gasps. In that silence, a voice in my head whispered, "If you save him, what happens tomorrow?" If David recovered completely, his charming, manipulative mask would slip right back on. He would hide the rest of the money. He would hire expensive lawyers, utilize his financial expertise, use our joint assets to protect Emily, and drag me through a bitter, ruinous divorce. He would strip me of the house, leaving me broke, exhausted, and unable to afford the $45,000 needed for Lily's upcoming chemotherapy. Saving his life meant signing a warrant for our financial ruin and putting our daughter's survival at risk. I took a step backward, away from his twitching body. Is it a sin to let a monster face the storm he built with his own hands? I stared at the wall clock. 1 minute passed. The ticking of the clock sounded like a sledgehammer hitting metal. I remembered Emily holding my hand at the kitchen table, looking at me with pity as she told me how brave I was for working those night shifts. I remembered her hugging me, her expensive perfume, bought with my daughter's treatment money, filling my lungs. 2 minutes. I remembered David coming home, pretending to be stressed, refusing to touch me, claiming his health was failing, while he had just returned from a luxury penthouse downtown. 5 minutes. My mind raced back to the pediatric clinic. I remembered sitting in the cold waiting room, crying silently because I didn't know how I was going to raise the next installment, while my husband was text messaging my best friend, laughing about how easy I was to fool. We teach women to be resilient, to endure, to swallow their pain for the sake of peace, but we never warn them that unconditional patience only feeds a predator's appetite. "Please," David gurgled from the floor, a single tear slipping from his right eye, his gaze locked onto mine with pleading, terrified desperation. He knew I was a nurse. He knew I understood exactly what was happening to him, and he knew, with agonizing clarity, that I was standing still. 7 minutes. My heart was beating so violently I could hear the blood rushing in my own ears. I picked up the phone again, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I dialed 9, then 1, but my fingers stopped on the final 1. The betrayal was simply too heavy. The pain was an physical anchor pinning me to the floor. 9 minutes. The golden window was closing. I thought of Lily. If David died, his high-value life insurance policy would pay out. We would be free of the medical debt. Lily's treatments would be fully funded, and she would never have to miss another appointment. 11 minutes. I stood in the center of the room, completely paralyzed in a gray area between survival and vengeance. I wasn't actively trying to kill him. I was simply unable to find the strength to save him. The sheer weight of the emotional trauma had locked my body in an absolute chokehold. Finally, at the 12-minute mark, a cold splash of reality hit me. I couldn't let him die in front of me. I couldn't carry that specific horror. With trembling fingers, I pressed the final digit and made the call. I spoke to the dispatcher, my voice sounding distant and hollow, as if someone else were speaking through my mouth. I reported the stroke, giving our address with clinical, flat precision. It took exactly 3 minutes for the sirens to wail in the distance and for the paramedics to burst through our front door. 15 minutes in total. The 15 minutes that changed the course of our lives forever. The human body is incredibly resilient, but the brain is a delicate, unforgiving map. David did not die. The paramedics managed to stabilize him, and the surgeons performed an emergency craniotomy to relieve the pressure in his skull. But because of the 15-minute delay, the silent gap where his brain was starved of oxygen while I stood frozen in the dark, the damage was catastrophic and entirely permanent. When David finally woke up from his coma 3 weeks later, the man he once was had vanished. The sharp, charismatic, manipulative husband who could sweet-talk banks and charm my best friend was gone. In his place was a silent, physically helpless man. He was left with complete paralysis on the left side of his body and severe, irreversible expressive aphasia. He can see, he can hear, and he can understand everything happening around him, but he cannot form a single coherent word. His voice has been reduced to guttural, frustrated grunts. Shortly after David was hospitalized, the legal and financial fallout began. Because David was incapacitated, I was granted temporary legal guardianship over his affairs. I hired a forensic accountant and laid bare the offshore account, the transfers to Emily, and the unauthorized loans David had taken out using our home as collateral. With David's fraud fully exposed to the bank and the courts, I was able to legally freeze the remaining assets, terminate the lease on Emily's penthouse, and claw back a significant portion of the diverted funds. Emily disappeared from our neighborhood overnight, too cowardly to face the community once the truth of her parasitic betrayal leaked out. With the recovered funds, I paid off the predatory private loans and fully funded Lily's second round of chemotherapy. Within 6 months, her leukemia went into complete remission. To the outside world, I had pulled off a miracle. I had saved my daughter, managed a family crisis, and stood by my disabled husband. At church, at the supermarket, and at the clinic, people constantly whisper about my strength. She is an angel, they say. After everything she went through, she still takes care of him. But inside, I am living in a silent, freezing hell. The most agonizing part of my daily existence is our daughter, Lily. She adores her father. She doesn't know about the offshore accounts. She doesn't know about Emily, and she doesn't know about the final notice from the hospital. To Lily, her daddy is her hero who got sick. Every single afternoon, Lily runs into the living room, hugs David's limp frame, and pushes his heavy wheelchair out onto the front porch. She holds his lifeless hand and tells him about her school day, smiling up at him with absolute, pure devotion. "Mommy saved you, Daddy," she said to him yesterday, her voice filled with pride. "If Mommy hadn't been there to call the ambulance, you wouldn't be here with me today." I stood in the doorway, clutching a dish towel, feeling my chest collapse. David slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes, wide, clear, and filled with a mixture of terror, sorrow, and absolute understanding, locked onto mine. In that quiet glance, I saw the truth. David knows. He knows that as a nurse, I recognized the stroke instantly. He knows that I stood over him while he gasped for air. He knows that I watched the clock. He knows that his silence is not just a medical consequence. It was my choice. The most painful prison we can ever inhabit is not the one built with iron bars, but the one constructed from the grateful smiles of the people we love, who believe we are heroes while we know we are monsters. I look at my daughter's radiant, healthy face, and then I look at my husband's silent, trapped form. I did what I had to do to save my child's life and protect our future, but the cost of that survival is a debt I will be paying for the rest of my days. Every tick of every clock in this quiet house is a constant, mocking reminder of those 15 minutes. I am faced with a daily, agonizing routine of lifting him, feeding him, and wiping the drool from his chin, all while knowing that I am the architect of his physical prison. I saved my daughter's future, but in doing so, I stole her father. And the worst part is, I can never ever tell her the truth. Every morning, I wake up to the same devastating paradox. I walk into the kitchen, prepare a nutritious breakfast for Lily, and then I blend a bowl of lukewarm porridge into a soft, consistent puree so that David can swallow it without choking. I am a nurse by trade, a mother by blood, and a jailer by choice. A marriage does not just end when a certificate is torn up. Sometimes it transforms into an elaborate, silent horror film where two people are forced to live inside the wreckage of their secrets. The emotional suffocation has become too much to bear. I look at David sitting in that wheelchair, and the anger that once burned like a wildfire has turned into a cold, heavy mountain of resentment. I cannot love him anymore. I cannot look at his face without seeing his hand hovering near Emily's waist in our kitchen, or remembering the text message where he reduced my entire existence to a convenient duty. But I also cannot look at him without seeing the terrified man on the floor, pleading for his life with his eyes, while I deliberately watched the clock. I am heavily considering filing for a divorce. I want to pack our bags, take Lily, and leave this house, this neighborhood, and this haunting routine behind forever. But as with everything in my life now, there is no clean exit. The trap is wound tighter than ever. If I choose to stay, I am sentencing myself to a lifetime of psychological torture. I will spend the next 20 years acting as the devoted, angelic caregiver to a man who broke my heart, wiping his face and lifting his dead weight, all to maintain a lie for the sake of our daughter's happiness. I will have to endure Lily's endless gratitude, feeling like a complete hypocrite every single time she hugs me and tells me how lucky we are that I saved her daddy. I will be serving a life sentence for a crime that no court of law even knows I committed. But if I choose to divorce him and leave, the fallout will be just as devastating. David cannot care for himself. His medical settlement and our remaining assets are enough to keep him comfortable here, but a divorce would force us to liquidate our home and split our resources. More importantly, how do I explain a divorce to a 7-year-old girl who worships her father? Lily will look at me with tears in her eyes and ask, "Mommy, how can you abandon Daddy when he is sick and needs us most?" To my innocent daughter, I will instantly transform from the hero who saved her father's life into a cold, heartless villain who walked out on a disabled man when things got tough. I would have to carry her resentment, or do the unthinkable, destroy her world entirely by telling her the grotesque truth about her father's betrayal and her mother's 15 minutes of silent vengeance. There is no good choice left. If I stay, my conscience will eat me alive. If I leave, my daughter's heartbreak will destroy me. One option punishes me. The other option punishes an innocent child. My life has become an absolute mess, a beautiful outward illusion built over a dark, rotting foundation. I am completely trapped in the gray space between justice and regret, and the walls are closing in every single day. I sit on the edge of my bed late at night, listening to the agonizing, rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock, and I find myself asking the same question over and over again. I know some people are perfect, but before you judge me, I need you to put yourself in my shoes and imagine what was happening to me in those 15 minutes. If you had uncovered what I uncovered, if you saw the person who was supposed to protect your child willingly putting her survival at risk for a cheap, mocking lie, what would your hands have done during those 15 minutes? Would you have pressed the button immediately? And if you were standing in my shoes right now, broken by the weight of a secret prison, would you stay and endure the lie for your child, or would you take her and walk away, even if it meant becoming the villain in her eyes? What would you actually do?
This case reveals what happens when betrayal, guilt, and impossible choices become permanent companions. The truth about life is that one act of betrayal can destroy many lives, but the choices we make in our deepest pain can shape the rest of our own forever. This case is closed. The archive doesn't end here. We follow every drama of the human soul. You have just seen one entry. Stay here to observe the next human character. Subscribe so the archive finds you first. And if this case moved something in you, leave that as a like and share the story.